Okay, in which case, let's just fire straight through as we're running a little bit late.
Sure.
Have a great talk.
Sure.
Can we have a round of applause, please, for Alex from River?
Hey, everybody. It's nice to be in London. I flew in this morning, but I had a chance to nap, so I'm running 100% again. Yeah, it's great to be in London. So I'm Alex Leishman. I'm the CEO and CTO of River Financial. For those of you who don't know, we're a Bitcoin company based in the United States, have predominantly served the American market, but are expanding our Lightning services to an international market, and hope that you guys can get out of this talk some insights into the past, present, and future of the Lightning Network at River. It's going to be a little bit less protocol heavy and more sort of like applied operational. What's the reality of running Lightning infrastructure at scale? And I put scale in quotes because the Lightning Network isn't anywhere near the size of sort of traditional payment systems at scale, but nonetheless, there are interesting operational lessons that we've learned over the years, and I hope to communicate some of those things to you. So let's get started. So just a brief overview of what we do at River. So historically, we've been known for our personal Bitcoin financial services in the United States. So we offer brokerage, custody and wallet, zero fee, dollar cost averaging, hosted mining, all in one app. Think of it like a Bitcoin-only Coinbase and wallet with Lightning Network and on-chain transaction support. Recently, we spun out this Lightning Network infrastructure that we've built to power our consumer business as a Lightning infrastructure as a service enterprise offering. And sort of the idea behind this is it's a very simple API custodial for developers who don't know how to run their own Lightning infrastructure, want to make adding Lightning Network to their apps very, very easy. Think like Stripe for Lightning. We have some awesome clients already. So we are the Lightning backend for the Chivo wallet in El Salvador. We've been serving them for quite some time now, and are really happy to partner with them. And it's been an honor to help advance Bitcoin's adoption across the world. And let's talk about the early days of Lightning at River. So we launched River in 2019 as a Bitcoin brokerage in the United States. And we just asked a simple question. Well, we're only doing Bitcoin. The idea behind River was to do a Bitcoin financial institution really, really well. And by focusing on Bitcoin, we would have the time and the engineering capacity to do the things that the Coinbases and the multi-coin exchanges of the world weren't doing. And so one of those obvious things back in 2019 was the Lightning Network. It was still in science experiment territory back then. For anyone who used Lightning back in 2018, 2019, the reliability was very questionable. It was still very early days, but it had come a long way from where it was in like 2017. And so we decided we were going to add Lightning Network deposits and withdrawals to the River app when we launched. So we built a very sort of simple MVP infrastructure to support that. One of the UX insights that we had back then, and it's obvious now, it wasn't obvious back then, was we offered a unified Bitcoin balance at River, and that you could withdraw from on-chain or on Lightning. A lot of people assumed when we told them we supported the Lightning Network back then that you had a Lightning balance and an on-chain balance at River. And while that's no longer sort of like a concept I think a lot of people have in their heads, back then that was like an interesting UX thing to teach people about. So how did Lightning Network transactions work for V1 of our infrastructure? So starting on the right side here, the first question to ask was, how do we run Lightning nodes for an app that's serving a bunch of users? What do we have to think about that we don't have to think about when running just a single Lightning node for ourselves? And we talked to a bunch of people. One of the conversations we had was with Alex Bosworth at Lightning Labs. And back then, he suggested that best practice was to run two nodes, a routing node that was public and connected you to the Lightning Network, and then what we call an end node or an internal node that you have a private channel with your routing node and you use to generate your invoices and originate any payments. And the reason there is that you can sort of separate your concerns. You can have This node, it only needs to know about like initiating payments and keeping track of all of the payments you're originating. This node handles all of the routing logic, and you don't have to worry about the scalability as much because there were a lot of sort of shared computational resources back then. Generating payments and invoices sort of would lock certain parts of the software, and we went with that. And then we had a wallet service, a more general wallet service that handled our on-chain transactions that we built ourselves. That was sort of the coordinator for passing any sort of withdrawal requests from the web app to our Lightning infrastructure. And we used RabbitMQ as a messaging bus for that. This infrastructure worked well while Lightning was still very nascent and small and kind of a science experiment. But there were a number of downsides. One of the challenges was we didn't really have any automation around channel management, and so we had to set up a lot of like monitoring and alerting to manually open channels to make sure that payments succeeded. Managing, like we had to put up Bitcoin into this channel here and to like automatically rebalance it so that payments would keep succeeding, which was sort of just like wasted capital, like locked up in this internal private channel. And then the worst part, actually, of adding Lightning to our business and running our infrastructure was actually the data and the audit. So as a financial institution in the United States, we have to undergo an audit, and the amount of complexity that this added to our financial audit for the like value it created for the business was like pretty immense. You can imagine explaining Bitcoin to auditors. Now imagine explaining Lightning to auditors, and explaining like where is the Bitcoin, where was the Bitcoin at midnight December 31st, 2019, when it was in a stuck HTLC, right? Like imagine like the numbers not adding up and trying to explain all of that, and then imagine like the bill, the hourly price of an auditor, right? It kind of gets out of hand. And so, interestingly, the biggest challenge was just data. And getting really clean books with Lightning that was easy to explain to auditors. So over the years, we just sort of kept it running like this, and our routing node became pretty big. So we first launched our node in 2019. So pretty proud of having one of the older nodes in the Lightning network, and it was very much a science experiment. We have this internal group. Where we send sort of like memories, and so I said, we had two $350 deposits on Lightning. It was a huge day for us. So over the years, this started growing more and more. We grew a lot as a business. The amount of money on River continued to grow, and the Lightning network itself made huge strides, mostly due to the work of a lot of the people in this room and others in the industry. And eventually, around 2021, 2022, it got to a point where we're like, okay, the Lightning network's pretty serious now. We had people around the world asking us if we could help them add Lightning to their apps. And we said, okay, it's time to invest in this and take this to the next level. What is some serious, how do we lay the foundation for some more serious Lightning infrastructure that solves some of our headaches? So I sort of put my like Jeff Bezos hat on with sort of the thinking back to his AWS email. And for those of you who haven't seen that, he sort of notoriously sent this email to Amazon years ago where he said, all service interfaces without exception must be designed from the ground up to be externalizable. That is to say, the team must plan and design to be able to expose the interface to developers in the outside world, no exceptions. Anyone who doesn't do this will be fired. Thank you, have a nice day. Sort of thought, okay, if we're really going to do Lightning seriously, and we have all these people asking us, if we could support them in their Lightning efforts, we need to take this mindset and encapsulate our Lightning infrastructure so that it's this high quality, reliable, externalizable service. And one of the insights here was nobody cares about nodes and channels. Everyone just cares about sending and receiving money. That's all they care about. They don't. With us, we in this room love to know, love the inner workings of the protocol, love thinking about channels and nodes and all that stuff. 99% of businesses and people just want to send and receive money. And so the interface for our Lightning service is effectively that, send and receive. We have this concept of just with a withdraw endpoint, and we have a deposit intent endpoint that you use to generate invoices of various types. And so the idea of the service is to abstract away all the complexity of the Lightning Network so that our web app or our consumer product, to be the first customer of this service, only needs to think about sending requests to actually make and receive payments. And feel free to ask questions along the way or raise your hand, by the way. Okay, so what does version 2 of our infrastructure look like? And this is the foundational infrastructure that we really built from the ground up and are iterating and improving on today. So on the left is a arbitrary client that is the Chivo app, but it could just as easily be the River app or other apps that are currently building on River Lightning services. So we have two main software services internally that we've built ourselves. So we have our API gateway and our supervisor. The other things are Lightning node implementations that we don't build ourselves. We run L&D internally. So what is the API gateway? So the API gateway is the business logic service. It's the web gateway that manages the client ledger. It manages receiving HTTP requests to generate deposits and withdrawals. It knows about the clients. It knows about rate limits and all of that stuff. The supervisor is our puppet master. The supervisor is responsible for accounting and node orchestration and channel orchestration and channel management. So the supervisor doesn't know anything about the customers of our Lightning infrastructure. It only knows about making sure that all of our nodes are operating properly. It's optimizing for hitting our payment success KPIs, and it's responsible for accounting data to make the audit much easier than it used to be. So let's see. So there's a few benefits to this setup, but there are still some drawbacks. But before that, let me get into some of just the charts to illustrate sort of the scale we're operating at. On the left is the channel count on our nodes, which continues to grow. Some of this because we're opening channels with more and more peers to make sure that our payment success rates stay high. Some of this is because people keep opening lots of channels to us. And on the right is our sort of event count through our Lightning nodes. So we just hit 1.5 million Lightning payments routed. For Lightning, that's a lot. That's in the thousands of transactions a day. But for an at-scale payment system, that's still just a drop in the bucket. But we very much believe what we're building here is a very long-term play, and we think that the Lightning Network will continue to compound in its growth over the years to come. So serious throughput hasn't been our major bottleneck at the moment. We're not like compute constrained or anything like that, but we're preparing for a future where we will be. So what are some of the pros and cons of the way we're currently running things? So the node redundancy that we have there, and I'll actually just go back to the diagram so it's easy to see. So in contrast to our V1 infrastructure, we now have multiple routing nodes and multiple internal nodes. This redundancy allows us to have zero downtime upgrades when there are software upgrades that are either imminent or just quality of life improvements as the protocol develops. For example, eventually Taproot channels will ship. We will need to upgrade our node software to do that. Ideally, we can do that without going down. So we can do rolling node updates through our routing nodes without any single point of failure. One of the downsides, though, is we still have this sort of these channels internally with locked up Bitcoin, which is just not super ideal. But luckily for us, we have this node supervisor that just keeps those channels balanced, and so we don't have to keep a whole lot of Bitcoin in there. Another downside here with having redundant nodes is having redundant or multiple identities. Nodes are stateful. They have reputation. We have our routing node 1 and our routing node 2 now. There's no fundamental reason we should have to have two nodes at River, but because of the but practically, because of the way that the software is implemented for Lightning node implementations, we're sort of forced to operate this way if we want to avoid having to build totally custom node infrastructure ourselves, which is just not something we want to be doing. And then this separation of sort of this API gateway and the supervisor has been very nice, actually. It's been a really great separation that we found. It works very well. And yeah, some other cons. Just the statefulness of things is still a little non-ideal in our system. Right now, a lot of things are done via sort of internal HTTP requests. We're looking to move things towards a much more sort of stateless, event-driven infrastructure so that we can just keep adding nodes as we need to, horizontally scale any of our software services and clean things up there. But overall, we're pretty happy with the state of things today. We have a lot of breathing room to scale, and it's a big upgrade from where we were. Some other general challenges we're focused on tackling over the coming year. Adding nines to our payment success rate. So our internal payment success KPI is 99%. One of the challenges with payment success rates in Lightning is we have no control over where people ask to make payments to. So there's sort of this thing in the Lightning network where payment failures are often not our fault, but they're our problem, right? And that's the mindset that we have. Things that can go wrong in the Lightning network that are not our fault or our problem include somebody has this really edge node that has no inbound liquidity, is trying to pay it and is getting upset about why can't I pay that node, right? That's not our fault, but it is our problem. And we are trying to think about smarter ways that we can improve the way we communicate errors and bubble them up to people trying to send payments, and educate the people building on River Lightning services to potentially prevent attempting to pay destinations that we know are pretty high likelihood to fail. Another common challenge that we face is just peers that are popular that we do have a lot of bandwidth to going down or having outages. And so what we found here right now is very manual approaches to things. Like, we see lots of, I won't name any names, so it happens to everybody, but node A is the 10th biggest node in the Lightning network, and today a bunch of payments are failing to them. Turns out they changed their IP address, and so we have to send them an email and see what's up. And in the meantime, all the people making payments there have complained, and it's either and they're blaming the app that built an RLS. That app is blaming us. We're blaming our peer, and it's our mindset and the hat we wear is it's always our problem, and we treat it as such. And so we try and build in a way such that we can proactively respond to these failures and prevent them ideally. Another one is maintaining capital efficiency while scaling with redundancy. We like having multiple nodes given the state of the node software implementations today, but you also have to keep Bitcoin on those nodes if you want redundancy. So you're putting more and more Bitcoin at risk. And so if you want to keep the amount of Bitcoin you're putting at risk on a Lightning node down, you have to get more and more capital efficient and get smarter with your channel automation. So that's just a challenge we're continually addressing. Our supervisor is getting smarter and smarter about when to close channels, sweep funds back to more secure custody, and things like that. Another challenge is just skating to where the puck is going. There's a lot of people working on a lot of different things. There's a lot of trends and things to chase. Seeing the signal through the noise is sometimes challenging. The next thing we're shipping is LNURL. That seems to be something that's very broadly being used across the board. And we try to be very practical-minded. LNURL, I think, is a perfect example of sort of practicality versus chasing engineering perfection. LNURL is not the most beautiful protocol. It's not theoretically the perfect sort of decentralized identity, payment protocol for a perfectly decentralized internet. but at the same time, it's the one everyone's using. And so we try and be sort of very realistic about building what we think people will actually use versus like a theoretical thing that we'd have to force on people. The biggest challenge, still the biggest challenge we're facing is we see sort of two categories of potential customers for our Lightning infrastructure. One is customers who know they want Lightning, and it's sort of a build or buy decision. And so for us, it's easy to say, hey, look, if you don't want to build this yourself, we're a great platform to build on. But the majority of businesses out there still actually need to be convinced that Lightning is useful to them. And by businesses, I mean crypto exchanges, I mean fintechs, I mean anyone who's adjacent to this that is likely to integrate this in the coming years. There's really a big lack of knowledge in people, even people just in the in the crypto industry. They've been so busy focusing on adding stablecoins and so many different assets to their platforms that they really just don't know anything about Lightning. And telling them it's a second layer and it's cool doesn't give them what they need to prioritize this on their product roadmap. And so one of the things we're working on and getting smarter about is like how do we show people like how this increases their monthly transacting users? How do we show people how this will add to their top line? And that's something we were spending a lot of time thinking about. And yeah, in terms of some future projects that we have coming, so I mentioned LNURL is coming soon. We're thinking a lot through how do we improve our payment failure debugging and bubbling up more information there. Scalability and reliability, just back-end infrastructure projects, such as moving more towards event-driven architectures, switching over to SQL databases for our nodes, and then lots of security considerations as we scale as well, building all the tooling, automating as much movement of funds as possible, getting humans completely out of the loop of any sorts of having access to funds or keys or anything like that. And yeah, that is it. Questions?
Great talk, Alex. And yeah, you touched on a lot of points there, but I'm going to go straight to the questions.
Thank you, that was awesome. I loved it. Can you just tell me about your fee policy on the channels? Do you charge any fees on the routing nodes?
Yeah, so we do charge fees on our channels. That's actually another project we should add as coming down the road. Right now it's very manual. We try and look at sort of what the most popular destinations are for our clients and try and keep our channel fees minimal to popular destinations. We're not optimizing right now for our routing revenues in our nodes. Probably in second half of this year is when we start tackling automating channel fee policies and getting smarter about making those optimizations. It's not something we spent a lot of time on today because there's still so much work to do just to get payments to work.
Great question. I'm going to go to the back there. Can I ask a question as I walk over?
Sure.
You're in the UK and in London. Does that mean River's coming to the UK?
Well, River Lightning Services is broadly available internationally. Dealing with the American regulatory system for our consumer financial products is enough of a headache for us for now. So, adding one more regulatory regime on there isn't in our short-term roadmap, unfortunately.
If I understood right, you've got multiple routing nodes, and each has its own segregated pool of channel liquidity. And when on the right-hand side there. So you then later on mentioned the SQL database. Is that the way that you get to group all of that channel liquidity into one single pool? Like a high availability, always on thing, but you don't depend on any particular node?
I see. No. So each node is a wholly independent entity, and they only know about each other through the Lightning protocol. When I was referring to SQL databases, I was more specifically referring to LND's work that they've done to add like Postgres or SQLite as a backend for the data store versus BoltDB, or I guess it's built on like etcd. And so I'm more specifically referring to that. So each of these nodes independently has their own database for storing channel state and things like that.
Great. Any other questions? Anything at all?
Oh, Peter.
I can't see. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Hi, Peter.
Quick one. What kind of hardware do you run all this stuff on? I mean, is it on like virtual servers? Is it on colo? What do you do?
Great question. And actually, I should have included that. So we actually used to run everything on-prem. We used to run everything on-prem in the data center in San Francisco. We had our own hardware, and we migrated last summer over to everything over to G-Cloud, to GKE. Kind of made me sad. Kind of feels like selling out. But at the same time, as a startup with scarce resources, we just had to make a judgment call over sort of where do we want to spend our time and energy? And we decided that running our own hardware, we couldn't get to the same level of security, scalability, and reliability as we could on like GKE or G-Cloud. So we made that call and had deprecated our on-prem infrastructure.
Fantastic. One more question? Yeah, I think we've got time for it. I'll run over.
Alex, are you seeing any of your users trying to arbitrage your inbound to their nodes?
We are. So
Okay.
this is another thing that we have to figure out is we have a whitelist right now for peers. So if you want to connect to us, you have to reach out to us to get added to the whitelist. And right now, we only add people who we think are going to be reliable peers and are relatively sort of high quality operations. But we do get people who want to have a connection to us so that they can get some inbound to us so that then they can sell their liquidity. And so we see a lot of people sort of moving money through River to try and do things like that. They'll get on our whitelist, peer with us, buy Bitcoin on River or deposit Bitcoin on River, and then withdraw it on Lightning, and then try and sell their own liquidity to other nodes. It's interesting. So we are seeing that. It's not like crazy, but we do see some people trying to play some funny games. It's not really a big deal to us at the moment, to be honest. It's kind of interesting.
Awesome. Another round of applause, please, for Alex. Great talk.